Zardek's arrival on Earth was nothing short of a whirlwind. The young alien had been handpicked by his home planet's intergalactic exchange program, his brilliant mind and insatiable curiosity making him an ideal candidate to study the enigmatic human species. With a mind brimming with questions and a determination to experience everything firsthand, Zardek stepped out of the transport pod and into Mark's ordinary life, ready to embark on an extraordinary journey. As Zardek's assigned human host, Mark found himself completely unprepared for the chaos that was about to ensue. He had expected a quiet, scholarly exchange student, not a boundless bundle of alien energy hell-bent on unraveling the mysteries of human reproduction. From the moment Zardek moved in, Mark's carefully structured routine was thrown into disarray. "Fascinating," Zardek exclaimed, his large eyes scanning every inch of Mark's modest apartment. "This is where you humans engage in your mating rituals." He ran his fingers along the spines of the books on the shelf, his antennae twitching with curiosity. Mark cleared his throat, unsure of how to respond. No, not exactly. This is just where I live. Mating usually happens somewhere else." Zardek tilted his head, his brow ridge furrowing in concentration. "I see. Then where do you humans go to perform this mating?" He leaned in, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I must observe it for the sake of my research." Panic flashed in Mark's eyes as he desperately searched for a way to change the subject. "Maybe we could start by getting you settled in. I can show you around the city and introduce you to some people." Zardek's face lit up with excitement. "Excellent. I'm eager to immerse myself in human culture. But first," he paused, a mischievous glint in his eyes, "I must understand this mating process. It is the key to unlocking the very essence of your species." Mark groaned inwardly, already anticipating the headaches to come. He knew that trying to dissuade Zardek from his singular focus would be like trying to stop a freight train with a toothpick. The alien's insatiable curiosity would inevitably lead him down a path of chaos and confusion, and Mark would be caught in the middle of it all. As they set out to explore the city, Zardek bombarded Mark with a barrage of questions, his fascination with human behavior increasing with every new discovery. He marveled at the intricate dance of courtship, the elaborate displays of affection, and the complex social dynamics that governed human interactions. Mark found himself constantly on the defensive, trying to temper Zardek's enthusiasm and steer him away from any potentially embarrassing situations. "And this dating ritual," Zardek murmured, "it is a vital precursor to the mating process, is it not?" Mark nodded reluctantly. "Well, yes, in a way, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Humans don't just mate for the sake of reproduction, you know. There are all sorts of emotional and social factors involved." Zardek's eyes widened with wonder. "Fascinating. Your species has evolved such intricate methods of pair bonding. I must learn more." He whipped out a small device from his pocket, rapidly tapping at the glowing interface. Mark's heart sank as he realized Zardek was likely accessing the human dating apps, a prospect that filled him with dread. "Zardek, maybe we could take a break and grab something to eat. I'm sure you must be hungry after all that exploring." The alien paused, his attention momentarily diverted. Yes, sustenance. I must replenish my energy reserves if I am to continue my research." He tucked the device back into his pocket, much to Mark's relief. As they made their way to a nearby restaurant, Mark couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Zardek had in store. One thing was certain, his life was about to become a lot more interesting and a lot more chaotic, with this curious alien roommate in tow. Over the next few days, Mark's apartment transformed into a veritable hub of alien activity. Zardek had wasted no time in immersing himself in the world of human courtship, much to Mark's growing concern. The alien's initial attempts at understanding dating rituals led to a series of hilariously awkward encounters. Mark would often return home to find Zardek hunched over his laptop, swiping furiously on various dating apps, his antennae twitching with concentration. "Mark, excellent timing." Zalek exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. "I've been studying these dating profiles, and I believe I've cracked the code to human mating behavior." Mark winced, already anticipating the impending disaster. "Zalek, I really don't think you should be using those apps. They're not exactly the best way to learn about human relationships." Zalek waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. This is the perfect opportunity to observe the mating dance in its natural habitat." He paused, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Although, I must admit, some of these messages I've been sending have not elicited the responses I expected." Mark buried his face in his hands, dreading the details. "What kind of messages have you been sending, exactly?" "Well, I've been introducing myself as a galactic ambassador from the planet Cillian, here to study the mating rituals of the human species," Zalek replied matter-of-factly. "And I've been offering to, breed with my potential mates as part of my research." Mark groaned. "Zalek, you can't just go around telling people you're an alien and asking them to mate with you. That's not how human dating works." Zalek tilted his head, genuinely perplexed. "But how else am I supposed to gather the necessary data? I must fully immerse myself in the experience if I'm to understand it." Sensing that reasoning with the alien would be a futile endeavor, Mark decided to take a different approach. "Okay, look, why don't we try a more, subtle approach? Maybe we could start by going to a party or a social gathering and observing human interactions there." Zalek's eyes lit up with excitement. "Excellent idea, Mark. I shall don my most convincing human disguise and infiltrate one of these parties forthwith." The following weekend, Mark found himself reluctantly accompanying Zalek to a lively house party, his stomach in knots. As they entered the crowded living room, Zalek immediately began scanning the room, his gaze darting from one person to the next. "Fascinating," the alien murmured, his eyes narrowing with focus. "Look at the way they interact, the subtle displays of attraction, the elaborate courtship rituals. I must get closer to observe them in action." Before Mark could stop him, Zalek had slipped into the crowd, his bright blue skin and unusual features thankfully hidden beneath a carefully crafted human disguise. Mark trailed behind him, craning as he watched the alien attempt to mingle with the unsuspecting partygoers. Zalek sidled up to a group of young women, his movements stiff and unnatural. "Greetings, fellow humans," he said, his voice oddly formal. "I am Alzar, and I'm here to study your mating behaviors." The women stared at him, bewildered. One of them leaned in, a confused smile on her face. Okay, Zar, that's interesting. Are you, like, a social anthropologist or something?" Zalek nodded enthusiastically. Yes, that's exactly what I am. And I must say, your kind's approach to pair bonding is quite intriguing." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Now tell me, how does one go about initiating the mating process?" The women exchanged awkward glances, and Mark felt his face flush with embarrassment. He quickly stepped in, grabbing Zalek's arm. "Excuse us, everyone," Mark said, flashing an apologetic smile. "My friend here is, new to this whole party thing. Let me just take him outside for a bit." As he dragged the bewildered alien away, Mark silently vowed to find a better way to introduce Zalek to human social interactions. Clearly, the alien's direct approach was only going to lead to more chaos and confusion. But with Zalek's unwavering determination to experience the mating dance firsthand, Mark knew he had his work cut out for him. If Mark had thought the party incident was the height of Zalek's antics, he was sorely mistaken. The alien's relentless pursuit of understanding human reproduction only seemed to intensify in the following weeks. Zalek had now set his sights on the most popular person at Mark's workplace, a charismatic and well-liked co-worker named Samantha. Using his advanced alien technology, the determined Cillian set out to devise an elaborate scheme to capture Samantha's attention. "Mark, I believe I've cracked the code to human courtship," Zalek announced one evening, brandishing a small device that resembled a futuristic remote control. Mark eyed the device warily. I'm almost afraid to ask, but what exactly is that thing supposed to do? Zalek's face lit up with excitement. This device will allow me to manipulate the pheromones and neural pathways of my chosen mate, Samantha, in order to trigger a mating response. Mark's eyes widened in horror. Zalek, you can't just mess with someone's brain like that. That's completely unethical and probably illegal. The alien waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense, Mark. This is all in the name of scientific research. I must understand the intricacies of human reproduction if I am to truly become one with your species. Before Mark could protest further, Zalek had already slipped out the door, his mind consumed by the prospect of finally experiencing the mating dance firsthand. The next day, Mark arrived at the office to find a scene of pure chaos. Samantha, normally the picture of poise and professionalism, was behaving in a manner that could only be described as erratic. She was giggling uncontrollably, her gaze constantly drawn to a flustered-looking Zalek, who was hovering nearby with a triumphant grin on his face. Mark felt the color drain from his face as he realized what must have happened. He rushed over to Samantha's desk, desperately trying to defuse the situation. "Samantha, are you all right? What's going on?" Samantha turned to him, her eyes slightly unfocused. "Oh, Mark, I'm just fine, really. In fact, I've never felt better." She cast another longing glance in Zalek's direction, a dreamy smile spreading across her face. Zalek chuckled, his antennae twitching with satisfaction. "You see, Mark? My plan has worked perfectly. Samantha is now fully receptive to my advances. We shall proceed with the mating ritual post-haste." Mark groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Zalek, you can't just drug someone and force them to mate with you. That's completely unacceptable." The alien's brow furrowed in confusion. "But I thought this is how human courtship is conducted. You all seem to enjoy these sorts of elaborate mating dances." Before Mark could respond, Samantha suddenly leaped from her chair and wrapped her arms around Zalek, much to the astonishment of their co-workers. "Oh, Zalek, you wonderful alien you," she cooed, nuzzling against his chest. "Take me away and let's start our life together." The room erupted in stunned silence, save for the occasional muffled giggle from a nearby cubicle. Mark felt his heart sink as he realized the gravity of the situation. Not only had Zalek's actions jeopardized his own standing at the company, but they threatened to expose the alien's true identity to the entire office. Mustering all his courage, Mark stepped forward and gently pried Samantha away from the bewildered Zalek. "Okay, everyone, let's all just take a deep breath here. Samantha, I think you need to come with me, and we'll get you checked out by a doctor." Samantha pouted, her grip tightening around Mark's arm. "But I don't want to go. I want to be with Zalek, my one true mate." Mark shot a pleading glance at Zalek, silently begging the alien to cooperate. "Zalek, you need to come with us too. We need to figure out what's going on and make sure everyone is safe." Zalek's shoulders slumped in disappointment, but he reluctantly followed Mark and the dazed Samantha out of the office. As they made their way through the stunned silence of their co-workers, Mark knew that his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. As Mark escorted the dazed Samantha and the dejected Zalek to the university's medical center, he could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. Not only had Zalek's reckless actions jeopardized his own standing at work, but they also threatened to expose the alien's true identity to the unsuspecting human population. Upon arriving at the medical facility, the staff immediately whisked Samantha away for a thorough examination, leaving Mark alone with the sullen Zalek. "I don't understand, Mark," the alien said, his voice laced with disappointment. "Why did you interrupt the mating process? I thought I have finally achieved the desired result." Mark pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to maintain his composure. "Zalek, you can't just use your alien technology to manipulate someone into mating with you. That's a serious violation of their free will and consent." Zalek's brow furrowed in confusion. "But I was simply following the human courtship rituals as I observed them." The females are supposed to be enthralled by the males' displays of dominance and power, are they not? No, Zalek, that's not how it works, Mark exclaimed, exasperated. Humans have complex emotional and social needs when it comes to relationships. You can't just force someone to mate with you, even if you think it's for scientific research. Before Zalek could respond, a group of administrators from the university's alien exchange program arrived, their faces etched with a curious mixture of concern and amusement. Well, if it isn't our resident alien researcher, one of the administrators, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Winters, said with a wry smile. I heard there was a bit of a commotion at your workplace, Mark. Mark felt his face flush with embarrassment. Dr. Winters, I'm so sorry about all this. Zalek's actions were completely out of line, and I tried to stop him. But Dr. Winters raised a hand, silencing him. Now, let's not be too hasty to judge. Zalek is, after all, here to study human culture and behavior. We can't very well fault him for being overly enthusiastic, can we? Zalek perked up, his antennae twitching with anticipation. Exactly. I was merely conducting my research in the most efficient manner possible. Surely you can appreciate the scientific value of my work. Dr. Winters chuckled, shaking her head. Well, I can't say I condone your methods, Zalek, but I must admit, your dedication to the program is quite admirable. She turned to Mark, her expression softening. I know this must be a difficult situation for you, but I hope you can understand that we're here to facilitate cultural exchange, not hinder it. Mark felt his stomach twist with dread. But what about Samantha? Zalek used his alien technology to manipulate her. Surely that's a violation of her rights. Dr. Winters waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't worry, we've already looked into it. Preliminary reports indicate that Samantha is perfectly fine, if a bit, smitten. We'll have our medical team monitor the situation, but I don't foresee any lasting harm. Mark stared at the administrator, his mouth agape. You can't be serious. Zalek's actions were completely unacceptable, and you're just brushing it off. Dr. Winters gave him a sympathetic smile. I understand your concerns, Mark, but you have to understand that from our perspective, this is all part of the cultural exchange process. Zalek's enthusiasm, while perhaps misguided, is actually quite valuable for our research. Zalek beamed, his eyes shining with excitement. Yes, you see, Mark, my work is of the utmost importance. I must be allowed to continue my studies unimpeded. Mark felt his heart sink as he realized that the university's administrators were more amused than concerned by Zalek's antics. Resigned to the fact that he was on his own, he knew he would have to find a way to rein in his alien roommate before the situation spiraled even further out of control. As Mark watched the unrepentant Zalek and the indifferent university administrators depart, a deep sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. He knew that the alien's single-minded pursuit of understanding human reproduction would only continue to wreak havoc on his carefully structured life. Determined to find a way to curb Zalek's antics before they spiraled even further out of control, Mark decided to take a more direct approach. Gathering his courage, he turned to the alien and cleared his throat. Zalek, we need to talk. I understand that you're fascinated by human culture and want to learn as much as you can, but your methods are causing a lot of problems for me and for the people around us. Zalek tilted his head, his large eyes blinking with innocent curiosity. Problems, Mark? I don't understand. I thought I was making excellent progress in my research. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Look, Zalek, the way you've been going about this isn't right. You can't just use your alien technology to manipulate people, even if it's for the sake of your research. The alien's brow furrowed in confusion. But I was merely following the observed patterns of human courtship. The females are supposed to be enthralled by the displays of power and dominance, are they not? No, Zalek, that's not how it works, Mark replied, shaking his head. Humans have complex emotional and social needs when it comes to relationships. You can't just force someone to mate with you, even if you think it's both scientific research. Zalek considered this for a moment, his antennae twitching with concentration. I see. So you're saying that I must somehow woo the potential mates, as you humans call it, before they will consent to mating. Mark nodded, relieved that the alien seemed to be grasping the concept, albeit in his own unique way. Exactly. Humans place a lot of importance on mutual understanding, trust, and respect in their relationships. You can't just skip straight to the, mating part. Zalek's face lit up with understanding. I understand now. This wooing process is a vital precursor to the actual mating ritual. Very well, Mark. I shall endeavor to master this human courtship dance. Inwardly, Mark braced himself for the inevitable chaos that was about to ensue. He knew that Zalek's approach to wooing would be anything but conventional, but at least he had managed to steer the alien away from his previous, more problematic methods. True to form, Zalek immediately set out to put his newfound knowledge into practice. He began by scouring dating apps and websites, crafting elaborate profiles and messages that he hoped would attract potential mates. Mark cringed as he watched the alien's attempts, each one more awkward and cringe-worthy than the last. Greetings, fair human females. Zalek would type, his antennae twitching with excitement. I am Zalek, a distinguished galactic ambassador, here to study your fascinating mating rituals. I offer you the opportunity to join me in the sacred act of procreation for the betterment of our two species. Mark would quickly intervene, deleting the messages and hastily redirecting Zalek's attention. Zalek, I really don't think that's the best way to go about this. Maybe we could try something a little more, subtle. Undeterred, Zalek then began showing up at Mark's workplace, attempting to woo Samantha and any other unsuspecting female coworkers he could find. Mark's friends and colleagues found the entire situation both hilarious and deeply uncomfortable, much to his chagrin. As the weeks wore on, Mark's patience wore thin. He knew he had to find a way to steer Zalek in a more constructive direction before the alien's antics caused any further damage to his social and professional life. The blind dates arranged by Mark proved to be a disaster of epic proportions. Zalek's attempts to woo his human partners were nothing short of cringe-worthy, as the alien's true nature became increasingly apparent with each encounter. Greetings, fair maiden, Zalek would exclaim, his voice unnaturally formal, as he approached his bewildered date. I am Zalek, galactic ambassador and seeker of knowledge. I have chosen you to be my mate, that we may engage in the sacred act of procreation and further the understanding between our species. The poor woman would stare at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and alarm. I'm sorry, what? Procreation? I thought this was just a casual date. Zalek would nod enthusiastically, seemingly oblivious to the human's discomfort. Precisely. This date is the first step in the mating ritual. Now tell me, how shall we commence the breeding process? At this point, Mark would quickly intervene, pulling Zalek aside and offering profuse apologies to the bewildered date. I'm so sorry, he's new to this whole dating thing. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The women, understandably rattled, would hastily make their excuses and flee the scene, leaving Mark to deal with the aftermath. Zalek, for his part, remained completely unperturbed, his focus unwaveringly on his pursuit of understanding human mating rituals. As word of Zalek's antics spread through Mark's social and professional circles, the young man found himself at the center of unwanted attention. His friends and co-workers, while amused by the alien's bizarre behavior, also found themselves increasingly uncomfortable with the implications. Dude, your roommate is really starting to freak people out, you know. Mark's friend Dave said one day during their lunch break, I mean, the guy's just walking around, talking about procreation and mating rituals. It's getting a little creepy. Mark groaned, burying his face in his hands. Tell me about it. I've tried to rein him in, but Zalek is just so single-minded when it comes to this whole human breeding thing. Day shook his head, a concerned frown on his face. Look, man, I get that he's an alien exchange student or whatever, but this is starting to cross some lines. People are going to start getting really uncomfortable if he keeps this up. Mark nodded, his stomach twisting with dread. I know. I'm trying to figure out a way to get him to back off, but it's like talking to a brick wall. He's just so damn determined to experience the mating dance firsthand. As the days passed, Zalek's antics only seemed to escalate. He would show up at Mark's workplace, attempting to engage his co-workers in impromptu mating discussions, much to their bewilderment and horror. The rumors and whispers among the staff only grew louder, and Mark found himself the unwitting center of attention. One particularly disastrous encounter with a group of Zalek's potential mates led to a confrontation that threatened to expose the alien's true identity altogether. Zalek, in his eagerness to initiate the mating process, had inadvertently revealed certain physiological traits that were distinctly non-human, sending the women fleeing in terror. Mark, mortified, had quickly stepped in, desperately trying to defuse the situation and convince his co-workers that it was all just a harmless misunderstanding. But the damage had been done, and Mark knew that he was rapidly running out of options. As he sat in his apartment, pondering his next move, Mark couldn't help but wonder how much longer he could keep Zalek's antics under wraps. The alien's relentless pursuit of human reproduction was causing chaos in his life, and with the university's administrators seemingly more amused than concerned, Mark realized he was on his own in this battle. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and as Mark sat stewing in his apartment, an idea began to take shape in his mind. If he couldn't stop Zalek's quest to experience human mating rituals, then perhaps he could at least try to control the chaos and mitigate the damage. Calling upon his most trusted friends and colleagues, Mark hatched an elaborate plan to stage a convincing human mating for his alien roommate. The goal was to provide Zalek with a simulated version of the experience he so desperately craved, allowing the alien to finally believe he had achieved his objective while sparing Mark and his community any further embarrassment. The first step was to find a willing participant, someone who could play the role of Zalek's mate, and convincingly go through the motions of a human courtship and mating ritual. After much deliberation, Mark approached his co-worker, Samantha, the very same person Zalek had previously attempted to breed with. To Mark's surprise, Samantha was more than willing to help. "This is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "Of course, I'll help you out, Mark. Anything to put an end to Zalek's antics." With Samantha on board, the rest of the plan quickly fell into place. Mark and his friends set to work, meticulously crafting an elaborate ruse that would convince the unsuspecting Zalek that he had finally experienced the full extent of human mating. First, they staged a chance encounter between Zalek and Samantha, with the latter playing the role of a smitten admirer who had been captivated by the alien's charms. Samantha, using her considerable acting skills, showered Zalek with compliments and flirtatious advances, much to the alien's delight. "Oh, Zalek, you are the most fascinating being I have ever encountered," Samantha gushed, batting her eyelashes coyly. "I simply must learn more about your culture and customs." Zalek, beaming with pride, eagerly engaged in the exchange, convinced that his mating rituals were finally bearing fruit. The next stage of the plan involved a mock wedding ceremony, complete with an officiant, witnesses, and all the trappings of a traditional human marriage. Zalek, his eyes wide with wonder, stood by Samantha's side, his antennae twitching with excitement as he recited the vows. "I, Zalek of the planet Cillian, take you, Samantha of Earth, to be my lawfully wedded mate," he declared, his voice solemn and resolute. "May our union be blessed with the gift of new life, and may our species be forever entwined in the sacred act of procreation." Samantha, doing her best to suppress a giggle, dutifully responded in kind, sealing the union with a passionate kiss. Mark and his friends, gathered around them, applauded and cheered, playing their roles to perfection. Finally, the grand finale of the plan, the honeymoon suite. Mark had arranged for a fancy hotel room, complete with rose petals, champagne, and all the trappings of a romantic getaway. Zalek, his eyes shining with triumph, eagerly ushered Samantha into the suite, ready to consummate their marriage. As the door closed behind them, Mark and his friends heaved a collective sigh of relief. The plan had worked flawlessly, and Zalek's quest for understanding human mating rituals had finally been satisfied. In the aftermath, Mark watched as Zalek emerged from the hotel room, his demeanor radiating a sense of fulfilled purpose. The alien approached him, a serene smile on his face. "Mark, my friend, I must thank you for arranging this most remarkable experience," Zalek said, his voice tinged with reverence. "I have learned so much about the sacred mating rituals of your species, and I can now return to my home planet with a deeper understanding of humanity." Mark nodded, a weary smile on his face. "I'm just glad we were able to, address your curiosity, Zalek. I hope you found what you were looking for." As Zalek departed, Mark breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the chaos and disruption in his life had finally come to an end. He had weathered the storm, and in doing so, had gained a newfound appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit in the face of the unexpected. In the aftermath of Zalek's grand mating experiment, Mark found himself finally able to exhale a deep breath of relief. The chaos and disruption that had plagued his life for the past several weeks had finally come to an end, and he was grateful to reclaim a sense of normalcy. As the alien exchange student departed, heading back to his home planet with a newfound understanding of human reproduction, Mark couldn't help but reflect on the lessons he had learned through this extraordinary experience. Who would have thought that an alien's quest to understand human mating rituals could turn my life upside down? He mused, shaking his head with a wry chuckle. Yet, in the midst of the mayhem, Mark had gained a newfound appreciation for the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. Despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges posed by Zalek's relentless pursuit of knowledge, Mark and his friends had found a way to not only navigate the chaos, but to ultimately turn it to their advantage. "I guess that's the beauty of the human experience," Mark thought, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "We may not always have the answers, but we find a way to muddle through, even in the face of the unexpected." As he settled back into his normal routine, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the way he and his community had handled the situation. The staging of the elaborate mating ritual for Zalek had required a level of creativity, collaboration, and quick thinking that Mark hadn't known he possessed. "Who knew I had it in me to pull off something like that?" he marveled, recalling the intricate planning and flawless execution of the plan. "I guess when push comes to shove, humans are capable of some pretty remarkable feats." Of course, not everyone in Mark's life had been as amused or understanding as he had hoped. His co-workers, while initially entertained by Zalek's antics, had eventually grown uncomfortable with the implications of the alien's behavior. Mark had had to do some delicate damage control, reassuring his colleagues that the situation was under control and that there was no need for alarm. "I still can't believe Samantha was such a good sport about the whole thing," he chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "I guess she really did get a kick out of being the center of Zalek's attention." As Mark looked back on the whirlwind of the past few weeks, he couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the experience. While it had certainly been a trying and at times humiliating ordeal, it had also served as a reminder of the depth and complexity of the human condition. "Zalek may have come here to study us, but in the end, I think he ended up learning just as much about himself and his own species," Mark mused. "Who knows, maybe he'll go back to his home planet with a newfound respect and appreciation for the idiosyncrasies of human behavior." With a contented sigh, Mark settled back into his familiar routine, his life finally free of the chaos and disruption that had plagued it for so long. He knew that the memory of Zalek's antics would live on, both in his own mind and in the collective experience of his friends and colleagues. "Maybe one day, I'll be able to look back on all of this and laugh," He chuckled, shaking his head in amusement. But for now, I'm just grateful to have my life back, and to never have to explain another mating ritual to an alien ever again. As Mark turned his attention to the future, he couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and curiosity about the mysteries of the universe. After all, if an alien exchange student could turn his world upside down, who knew what other surprises the cosmos had in store?